Good morning and welcome to a workshop that we're hosting today virtually. Typically we do these things and there's a number of you out there that we're talking with, but today we're going to do this virtually because of the issues of the COVID virus. So we're here at a auto dismantler's facility, and today's presentation is going to be talking about something that we don't always do maybe a good enough job on, and that's BMP maintenance and even the installation. So we're going to go through that today, and certainly looking forward to that. We have a number of sites along this facility that we're going to go into in detail. My name is Bryan Hofmann. I'm with Filtrexx International. And today we have Aaron Ortiz from WGR Southwest, a consultant that works with this site. So, without further ado, let's just get right into this and get going. Aaron, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about just the site in general, auto dismantlers, maybe some of the particular needs of auto dismantlers? You see a wide range of folks in what you do.
Well, the biggest challenge for auto dismantlers would be obviously metals, but then of course you have oils, you have different types of fluids. So I'm going to think of when I think of BMPs, what's the first line of defense? Well, good housekeeping. That'd have to be it. It starts there. A BMP is only as good as you maintain it and as you have it in what we call a treatment chain. It's not just one BMP that stands alone that's going to bring you to where you need to be. It's things in combination together that help to give you good stormwater numbers. So a place like this would be a couple of challenges. When you have, of course, the abundance of metals. You have, of course, the sources of oils. So those things you have to think about. And it starts with cleaning up, sweeping up, things like that. I know it sounds basic, but really that's where it starts.
Great, yeah. So with that, we're just going to kind of start walking through the site. So here we're coming up to our first proprietary BMP, and this is what is called a Compost Sock. Basically, this is a filtration type material. Very simple. It passively will filtrate stormwater. And so the idea behind this, as you see this parking lot and all that sediment and so forth will flow up to this device. It will hit it, it will raise up, solids will fall out, and then there's a media in here that actually grabs the very fine sediment. So as you can see, this has been swept up now before we put our BMPs on here. This one is actually showing an additional BMP that wasn't necessarily in this SWIP. And this is a mat with an Excelsior product inside of it. It again slows down the sediment, catches the sediment in the nooks and crannies of this. And we're just showing that for purposes of education. Inside of this is an insert. We'll show in detail in the next station the cartridge that is inside of this. There's a bucket in it with a drain. We'll go more into detail. Sometimes on this particular type of material, some folks will cut this end off and pour out some media and then actually attach it to this other end, so there's one continuous piece here. But for purposes of this demonstration, and this is the way a lot of folks do it, we just nestle those two pieces together. Want to make sure that there's no water that's going to go through that. If you have concerns about the really heavy downflows, you might throw a rock bag on top of this, sometimes just to hold that all in place. But that should be ready for the season. We would sweep this one more time. There's a little dust that comes out of the BMP. That's normal. That's has to do with the seeding process. But yeah, that's what that looks like.
As a consultant, what am I looking at here? Well, first of all, in this particular application, I would look at this as a drain that we don't necessarily take a sample from. Why do I say that? Well, if you're going to grab a sample from this drain and you're to reach down in order to get your sample, you end up removing your BMPs, you lose the benefits of your BMPs. So in this particular application, you want to do it in such a way as if this drain isn't necessarily a drain where you're collecting a sample, but it's a drain that maybe feeds to your sample point, to your point of discharge. So that's why I'd use this particular application like this. And as Bryan was saying, you don't want to put the BMP end on end. Why? Well, because what happens is you end up having spaces in between where the water flows and it's no longer treated. So you want to give every possibility for water to run through something first. So that's why you definitely want to have the overlap, and you want to bring them together so that the water has to work through your BMP and not bypass it.
Now, yesterday I actually cleaned out the bucket, and this is the material that was in the bucket. The wood chips are certainly part of the composted organic media, but lots and lots of sediment inside of there. Aaron, do you remember how long ago these BMPs went in?
They were installed September of last year, so it's been just about a year.
So really, in the scheme of things, not a lot of sediment for, again, this type of a site. I've seen where we literally get an entire bucket full of sediment out of these things. So whatever they're doing on this site, I think they did a really nice job. So. And
something else to keep in mind, lots of times people will, and we recommend as a rule, probably doing your BMPs towards the middle or end of September, because that's shortly, at least in California, before the rains normally come. So you want to get everything set up right before the rains come to get the most benefit from your BMPs when the rains start. However, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of people clean their sites up, do a real good job of getting everything BMPs all set up, and then don't do a whole lot after that. This is a BMPs, or should I say good housekeeping. I know I keep circling back to that, but it really is important. Good housekeeping on a regular basis is really crucial to helping to get your numbers where they need to be, especially when it comes to a facility like this where you have to sample for any number of metals which have relatively low numeric action levels. So you want to make sure that to reach those levels, to reach the level, you want to give yourself every advantage you can. And simply coming around and sweeping things up on a regular basis will go a long way to helping your BMP do its job of helping keeping your water acceptable discharges.
Great. So we're just going to take a stroll here and walk towards our next drain. There's actually 4 drains on this site, and this drain is one that again has BMPs that have been in for almost a year now.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah. So this is we're just going to walk you through the processes of what to look at, and let's analyze this and decide whether or not this BMP should be replaced for the new year or if it has a little bit more life in it. What I see with this is that I'm not seeing a lot of sediment on the outside here. I am seeing some staining here and a little bit of sediment here. So the good news is that you're still going to get water to go through the mesh and in the media. The question is the media full? As I'm going into the new season, I would certainly replace this, even though I'm seeing the media or the mesh out here not filled up. The other issue is the holes. These are not necessarily bad, but this certainly is over here. That's going to probably leak some media out. So I would go ahead and take this and move it off.
It depends on your pollutant loading. If you have a lot of pollutant loading or a significant amount, you probably want to change your BMPs maybe twice a year. In September, they may be considered maybe sometime January, February, just to give yourself every possibility of a good sample. If your pollutant loading is relatively low, then perhaps your BMPs can last a year. It really depends on what your numbers are telling you. You have samples. Your samples can tell you whether or not you need to soot shelter BMPs. I've had some clients where they were able to hold on for a whole year and it's not a problem. Others, they really need to switch it out at least at a minimum twice a year. It really depends on your good housekeeping. It depends on what you do outside. It depends on the kind of pollutants you have. There's a lot of things. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull this grate. I've done some initial sweeping around the site. Let's see just what we've got in this guy here. Oh, we've got a little bit of cobwebs in here. And so we're going to go ahead and pull the filter out. The filter actually looks reasonably well.
I've seen worse.
Yeah, I've seen a lot worse. The material, yeah, that's just not a lot at all. We're going to go ahead and replace. We're going to go ahead and replace this with a new filter here. But that's not. That really is not an issue at all. When these buckets are full, they can be well over 70 pounds or so.
That's a good point to bring up. And think about it. If you need someone, get some help. Try not. If you can't do it on your own, don't. It's for safety reasons.
Great. So we're going to stick this in, but again, new cartridge versus the old one. You can still see there's a fair amount of space here. Again, just the bottom of that cartridge has really been affected. You never know what's in the actual cartridge itself, but I would feel comfortable to have that one go at least another rainstorm. But since we're here and we're getting ready for the first,
that's all there's to it.
That's it. Yeah.
It almost seems too simple.
Yeah. Put that back in. Drop that in the hole. And we're good to go for the upcoming rain season. I always like to kind of clean this up a little bit. And grate goes on. I want to talk a little bit about this material too. This is a little stronger material than the one that's there. So it's designed to actually be able to drag it on an asphalt or concrete. And we want to make sure that we have a good seal right here between the two sides.
Many times people find with socks you're going to have water back up. I mean, it's natural to have, as they filter through, the flow through I think was 8 gallons per linear foot, right?
7.5 to 8 gallons per linear foot.
So if you find that you have a lot of backup, one thing that we recommend doing is either put another extra sock and making your area wider, so that there's more sock the water can go through. So if you get a little too much backup here, consider putting another sock in and making your loop a little bit wider so that there's more sock the water can go through and drain faster. Just a thought.
And so if I was to measure this, we'd probably say that's 7 to 8 feet. And so you're looking at maybe 55 to 60 gallons a minute. So when Aaron talks about putting it out here, you might be able to double, triple, quadruple that number to 100 to 200 gallons a minute. So if you have the space, that's certainly a preferable method. And the other point is, if you have the space, it again adds another layer of the treatment train you were talking about a little bit earlier. Now all of a sudden you've got an outside ring, one treatment, a second ring, and then the final unit down inside of the basin. So. And
one more trick that I like to talk about. This is something that Bryan had mentioned to me years ago, and it's a really good trick. If you do use, in this particular case, for Filtrexx, they have a particular product where it's designed called Metal Locks to help pull out additional metals from water. what I would recommend is if you do use a metal lock sock, you'd put that one on the inside ring, and you want to put some Sil Socks on the outside ring. Why? The Sil Socks act like your first line of defense. They'll come and they'll filter out a lot of the solids, they'll filter a lot of oil and grease, they'll grab a lot of things, and then that'll leave the second layer of water to go through so that your metal locks can do the job of pulling more of the metals out of the water. It's a double filtration, and it increases the ability of your water to have better numbers. So just something to consider, again, if you have the room.
So these socks are designed, once they're put in place, to stay in place. And some folks will move them around thinking, hey, I need to clean my site up, and then put them back in place. Some folks will actually flip them over and try to utilize what they consider is more area of the media. And that really can be detrimental on a site, especially an industrial site that has very tight benchmarks. And so this is, consider this like an air filter, if you will. An air filter you leave in place, it grabs all the dust and so forth, and when you take it out, if you bump it, you see things move around. It's exactly what can happen with these socks. If you start to move them, it jostles up the media, and so the next rain event, you can actually have a surge in pollutants, be it sediment and or metals in particular, and we've seen that. And so be sure that once you put these in, the only thing that you do to them is you sweep the outside of the mesh lightly to make sure you knock off any caked on material. Other than that, sweep around, sweep inside, but don't move the device until you're ready to actually change it out.
And something else to consider, if this were a sampling point, if you're gonna grab a sample from here, you wanna set this up just like you see here, where you've got enough coverage, you've got it, not end to end, but also that way you can remove your drain grate to get to your sample without jostling or moving the Filtrexx. If you have it over the drain, or you move the drain, or you go like this and then you pull it off, what are you doing? You're basically just sponging it back into the drain. So this is a good setup here where it gives you enough room where you can get your drain hook and you can pull the lid off without necessarily disturbing the Filtrexx, and that's what you want.
Great point. So yeah, we're going to move on here to another application, and roofs are a real issue, and Aaron's going to talk more about all the things that roofs and buildings can add to the site. But I'm just going to talk real briefly about this particular BMP. This is a downspout, and again, all we're doing is we're laying a sock around it. I pre-swept this fairly decently to keep it nice and clean. A couple things you want to be considerate of is if you back up water, is it actually going to go into the building or not? So kind of keep that in mind. But if that's not an issue, and typically a size like this doesn't have it back up that badly, then it can run out here. Now you get another treatment for the roof material prior to it going back in the drain. So Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, the challenges that I found with roofs is, for example, a facilities like this, they have to look for zinc, okay? Well, as you can see, this is galvanized sheeting, and even though it's painted, which is a good idea, the paint is not exactly new, so you can see that there's opening and there's gaps in the paint. Well, that means where there's exposed galvanized sheeting, you're going to have zinc that may leach out into the stormwater. And well, technically, building structures are not considered, part of your pollutant assessment in terms of pollutants, that for industrial activity. The bottom line is when you have a yard full of metals and you're looking for zinc, how are you going to say, well, this much of our zinc is coming from our roof as opposed to this much zinc coming from all the metal sources in the yard? So it's if you can do this, it's a good idea, simply because, especially if you have galvanized roofing, you want to have an extra layer of protection to collect, especially zinc in this case.
Question, what are other things that can happen on roofs? Can you get, I've heard stories where folks get blow-in from other facilities up on the roof. Do you ever run across that?
We do. We have one client that was having nitrates, and they actually, even though their SIC code, their standard industrial classification code, required them to include nitrate and nitrite as nitrogen in their stormwater sampling, they had no industrial activities that actually included that, but yet they kept going over the numeric action level of 0.68 milligrams per liter. And so we looked and we tried to find any industrial activity, could not find any industrial activity that would cause nitrates. But we did find that there was a fertilizer facility that was upwind from them a few hundred to maybe like a half a mile away. And so we did some air deposition testing and found that they actually had nitrates contributed to the facility from air deposition. And so we were able to, they had a level 2 technical report where basically made the argument that it was a non-industrial source. It was coming from off-site, and we proved it. But also on roofs, if you have venting, that's a big issue. People say, hey, it's just a roof, what's the big deal? Well, if you have industrial activity inside and it vents to your roof, that's going to wash off down your storm drain. So just because something's done inside doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to make it outside. So that's another good reason to have extra layer of protection, simply because you don't know what's being vented to your roof.
Great points, Aaron. Yeah. So we've done 3 different stations here. We're going to move on to our final application for this particular site. Before I do that, I just want to mention a little bit about this Sil Sock. We've been doing this for about 18 years or so, and really haven't changed the format of putting a filter media inside of a sock. And what we like about this so much is it's so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways on a particular site. You can stack it, you can curve it, you can bend it. It conforms to the hard surface. You don't have to trench it in. These are all really admirable qualities in a BMP. You want to be able to have one that you can use in a number of different ways. This last application is for perimeter control. And a lot of times on industrial sites, you might get run-on from another site. And so with this application, we know that run-on is coming from off-site. And so you could certainly put some of this material down just to try to capture any of that material if you felt that the levels were high enough to offset what you were doing yourself. So again, a nice application is just to put this again on the upside of the property for the drainage downhill. So.
Couple points. One, you notice, again, we talked about the overlapping layering. You don't just put it end to end. But 2, also, if you do decide to use a Sil Sock, they also come in 160-foot lengths, I believe. So in this application, as you can see, the whole yard, or maybe it's hard to tell from the camera, this part of the yard's higher, and it flows towards the west. So in this case, putting just one sock, maybe 160-foot, sock all along the perimeter here might be a good idea. That way you have one continuous sock without necessarily any breaks. And if it's not long enough, you can always then you'd want to double layer it that way. So that's another thought. You can just get a pallet that's 160 footer and put that along your perimeter as well.
Well, that's it for applications. Now we're just going to take you on a quick overview of the actual product itself, some things to look out for. And we would recommend this for any BMP that you're looking at. Understand what the BMP is good at, and I would encourage all of you to, again, we're going to talk about one particular BMP here, but when you're looking at BMPs just in general, know what you're getting into and what you're buying. Make sure that it has third-party testing and that it's doing what the design calls out for on that site, and what the stormwater consultant is recommending for that site. Manufacturers are certainly happy to do that. Your stormwater consultant can answer some of those questions, or possibly all of those questions as well. So that's the biggest point, is know what that material is all about. So we're going to talk very briefly about Filtrexx products, and again, we've kind of gone into talking about the applications, but what's actually in the material and why does it do what it does. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut open the Sil Sock material here and pull out some of the media. This is a composted organic media, and though it looks very random, it actually has a specific design to it. And it's designed to flow as much water through the device as possible while capturing as much of the pollutants as possible as well. So that's that material. This particular product will grab pollutants in 3 different ways. First of all, physically it traps the material inside of the nooks and crannies in the media. We're slowing the water down, so some of the heavier material is falling out in front of it. So that's all physical. Chemically, there's an ionic exchange that goes on. The material, the organic material, is charged differently than the pollutants and sediment. And as we all know, opposites attract. And so those pollutants are actually getting pulled into the media itself. And so and then the third one, of course, is this is a living, breathing material with microbes, and so it actually can degrade some of the pollutants, certainly oil and grease. So that's the Sil Sock. This comes in a 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, and 32-inch diameter. And depending on the parts of the country, depends on how much rainfall you're getting, that will dictate the size of the material. For industrial sites out here in California, we typically see 8-inch and 12-inch socks used on a regular basis. I'll briefly talk about this material here. We did, let me just go ahead and cut this open. And you'll see again, it's the same mesh structure. The mesh has an 1/8 inch opening. We want to get material into the media as quickly as possible. This is an Excelsior, and this will certainly slow any of that sediment down. And then there's a recycled mat that is put in there for basically weight to hold that on top of the grate. So very simple structure, but does a good job of attracting sediment. This is the cartridge we talked about. The media inside this is a little finer than the media that we showed in the Sil Sock, and it also has adsorbents in there to collect heavy metals and nutrients and hydrocarbons that are of concern. So very aggressive filter on the marketplace. And so here we have a newer version of that mesh. It's a heavier weight mesh, and so it's much stronger than the one that we've had for years and years, and we're finding some really good applications for it being able to drag it on asphalt. Then we're back over here. This is our Enviro sock line that we see on a lot of industrial sites, and this material is the same media as provided in the Sil Sock, but then we add these adsorbents into it. And this particular sock we've now changed to the color orange, because so many times one of the biggest things about maintenance is people are driving over it. And on that front, one thing that we didn't talk about is if you do get excessive folks to drive over these, we would recommend putting up something, whether it be a cone, maybe changing to the orange color. Some folks put concrete barriers around it if you have enough room. This site is very tight, so that would be very difficult. But certainly if you have larger areas, putting up concrete structures in order to maintain these is very important. We want to try to maintain the health of your BMP as much as possible.
And in this case, especially like in high traffic areas, socks may not be applicable. I mean, we saw that they were getting kind of beat up. Consider putting in some sort of filter. In this case, we're talking about Filtrexx, because that way they're subterranean. They don't get run over with that, and then they'll still be able to filter your water.
And that's really it from this auto dismantling site. Hopefully you've pulled away a few nuggets. Again, feel free to hit that chat button and ask your questions. Aaron, are there any final thoughts?
Just one. During the years ago, we had another stormwater permit in California. It was a 97 permit. And something that word used in that permit was the iterative process, the step-by-step process. And that's what we're talking about here. I talk about layers. So let's take it one step at a time. Before you expect to go to some sort of $250,000 to $500,000 treatment system, how about we start with the basics? I know, so we'll circle back to good housekeeping on a regular basis. I know I said it a lot, but it really is key. And then let's start with putting some socks in it. If that's not enough, put in some filtration in the side of the drains themselves and see if that helps. Maybe add some filtration to your downspouts. And then eventually, if you find these different layers aren't still enough, then you'll have to go to something a little more expensive or more in terms of a treatment system. But let's start with the iterative process, the step-by-step. Let's start with something smaller, see if that works for you, and take it from there. So part of that is being proactive in your maintenance. If you, like I said, I recommend changing maintenance in September and sometime in January or February. However, if you walk out and find that there's a sock that's damaged pretty badly, or if you find that your numbers are starting to climb up, well then, anytime's a good time to change your sock. I mean, if that's the case, then consider just replacing your BMPs at that time. So it really comes down to staying on top of your maintenance and staying on top of monitoring your water and seeing where your water is going. Do we need to do this? You know, and take a look at it's a holistic program. It's not just one piece. It's part of a larger treatment train, from practices to monitoring.
That's a great point. We get asked the question all the time, when should I change out my BMP? And we can give you some broad guidelines, but it really depends on the pollutant loads that you have at the particular site, be it sediment or any of the other constituents. So to your point, really watch it closely, and you will become the expert. Within that first year, you'll know your BMP, you'll know your site, and you'll understand what it takes to do that next change out. So,
Absolutely.
Great. Well, again, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you all for watching this as well.